Hello, welcome back. I'm Becky, I'm craft streaming stuff, a couple of different things every week, so I'm kind of running crafts for a month, and each day of the month that I'm streaming I do a different craft. So today is Friday, so today we're making Totoro family out of tinfoil and paper clay. So I'll do a quick rundown of what happened last week, what we did last week, and then we'll get on to covering our Totoros in clay. This is what they look like now, and they look a bit like pudgy potatoes, which is sort of hilarious. But yeah, we're going to make them look less like Totoros, less like potatoes, and more like Totoros. So last week we started off by designing a little Totoro family who look like this. The idea of the full Totoro family is that it's two of my friends turned 40 recently. They are married, and they have a 2-year-old, 3-year-old. He might be 4 now. The year's been confusing with the pandemic. And then from that, we built our 3 Totoro sculptures, or what was it? Potato Totoro is what we've been calling them, because to me they look like potatoes. I'm just going to put these little 2 to the side, and we'll start with this guy for the moment. Yeah, how's everybody doing? So this is paper clay by a company called Creative. They do a number of different clay products. It starts off quite dry. You have to work it with a bit of water, and it does work really well with tools, and it feels quite heavy and quite like DAS when you open it. It gets lighter and it gets smoother and it gets nicer as it dries, so it's lovely stuff and I really like using it. Right, so just with any clay, I really like to start by just working it, getting it warm, getting used to it in your hands. But yeah, paper clay, quite dry, quite fibrous. It gets better the more you work it and the more water, not the more water you use, but as you start to kind of play with it and add it to things. But I don't like using rolling pins. I find them really boring. Maybe one day I'll get a pasta maker, that's really good for rolling out clay. But I prefer to just work clay in my fingers to get a nice thin layer, thin piece. That was the word I was looking for, that I can then apply to my sculpture and just start working it from there. So yeah, once you've got your clay kind of working and you've got a nice piece, I will start putting it onto my sculpture. This layer, this first bit, is kind of just about covering up all the tinfoil. So getting really nice coverage all the way around the tinfoil, and then once it's all covered, then we'll start to really sculpt in the details. So yeah, I'm not worrying about any cracks or anything on Totoro at the moment. I need to give them different names, like Totoro or something. I don't really want to call them after my friends because that seems a bit weird. They'll give them names, I'm sure, once they've got them. But right now, so I can refer to the big, middle, and little one. Medium Totoro. Clay will struggle to stick on if it's not all the way around and joining up to itself. There's nothing for it to hold on to on the foil. So you really have to kind of, until it's all covered, you're kind of working a little bit against it. The speed at which I'm running out of clay is quite alarming. Don't know why I bought such a small packet. I usually buy the bigger packets, and this is a really tiny packet of clay. And I sort of found it and was like, yeah, I've got enough clay. And I sort of assumed it was a bigger packet. I didn't really look at it properly. It's going to be fine. So with the eyes, I'm not worrying about the eyes at the moment. I'm just getting the clay round them, and then I'll kind of work in and sculpt later. Paper clay is good in that it's got quite a long work time. Like, it doesn't dry out too quickly, and if it does, you can usually bring it back to life with a bit of water, so it's not anything really to worry about as you're working with it. You know, something like epoxy sculpt has a lot shorter work time. After about half an hour with epoxy sculpt, it turns into a different kind of clay, so actually there are different things that you do at different stages. An epoxy sculpt after an hour, then you can get fine details in it. Whereas in that first hour, it's really sticky. So you use it to kind of get on and get the base layer on, and anything that you need, additional details that you need, you kind of attach them to the sculpt and then sculpt them out of the sculpt later. Paper clay is more forgiving. It's a lot like DAS, if you've used DAS, just kind of standard air dry clay, except in terms of the weight when it dries and how beautiful it sounds. So you can really make this look like porcelain if you're prepared to spend a lot of time sanding it. What I'm going to do on the base is I'm actually going to leave the base kind of clear of clay, just because it means I've got somewhere to stand it while it's drying. And then when I finish them, I will put a felt base on so that they can stand on surfaces and not scratch at all. So that depending on where my friends want to put them, they will be surface safe. But yeah, it's great to have a base like this and have somewhere that you can stand your sculpture on while it's drying, because drying, I don't like doing things in 2 stages, which you'll have seen if you stopped in for the Bone Harp chill stream. You'll have seen how little patience I have as a maker. I just like to get on with things, so I don't really want to do a base and then wait for it to dry and then come back, but this method means I don't need to worry. But yeah, they are little chonkers, and especially with clay, sort of you want them to be chunky so that they, because they're fluffy, really. So if you're not making them out of fluff, I've seen some wonderful needle felted Totoros, and there's some wonderful Totoro plushies. But if you're not making them that way, you sort of do have to give them that extra chunk so that they feel like they've got that kind of puffed up fluff bulk. Don't be afraid of putting too much clay on if you're sculpting this way, because as you kind of work it and work with the water on it in a second, you'll kind of spread it out, and you might have bits that kind of come off in your hands, and kind of, you know, you can take excess off. So don't be afraid to go too mad at this point, and then take it off later. Clay is a lot more forgiving than cutting things. You can add things and take things away. Well, you can at the stage where it's still wet. Don't, wait till it's dry and then attempt to do that, because then you'll have some problems. But yeah, I haven't worked with paper clay for a while, actually. One of the other ways that I work with paper clay, which is probably interesting to talk about, is how I work with some of my larger sculptures. And how I'd probably work if I wasn't doing this on stream. So usually, or if I'm doing something bigger, I would actually cover the whole sculpture with paper clay pulp. So I would take a load of paper clay, I would chop it all up, I'd put it in a bowl overnight with some water, like really mix it up and try and get it really smooshy, and then leave it in the water overnight so it really everything gets well mixed in, and then I just apply that with a spatula or something over the whole sculpt, leave it to dry, sand it, and then put the details on this way. But watching me do that on stream is the most boring thing you've ever seen, so we're not doing that today. Working out where my eyes are. So they sort of disappeared under the clay. Right. When you're doing clay and you're working with water, when you've got a water-based clay or an air-dry clay, cloth is your good friend for, cleaning up water mistakes, smoothing stuff. Just cloth is your good friend. Always have a scrap cloth. I have a big strip of jersey fabric that I bought from a fabric store really as a cheap offcut a couple of years ago, and it is just every so often I cut a bit off it and it becomes a scrap cloth. So for now I'm just going to take water on my finger and I'm just going to start smoothing this round, working out all the cracks, and smoothing it in so it's really holding the shape of the clay. And you'll see as I do this how the cracks, nice little cracks come out of paper clay. Paper clay is not one that cracks as it dries. It's pretty good as it dries. It kind of becomes more interesting to work with as it dries. When it's wet, it's kind of like any other air dry clay. When it's dry, it's exciting. I really want this hand to stay here. I actually have a whole set of clay tools that I barely use. But sometimes, like this, for getting down into kind of little bits like this and just pushing the clay down, a clay tool is really useful. Just making sure that's stuck down there. I do use my clay tools more with epoxy sculpt. They work really well on that, but air dry clay I've always found works best with human fingers. Maybe it's something to do with the heat, probably. But yeah, just work that around and get a nice smooth line in that gap. It's kind of, so he's completely covered with clay, but we're still properly seeing that line to the arm. Any questions as we go? Show us the tools. Show you all the tools. There's my collection of tools. I'll put them out on the table in just a second. But this one, is just a rubber tipped one. These are often used for either clay work or icing work. People use these for as well. So yeah, this is a rubber tipped sculpting tool, I think they're called. So I have a couple of these in different shapes, which are quite useful for gaps and lines. The round ball ones I'll show off in a minute. Those are great for epoxy sculpt and getting really smooth things with that. But these were like a £5 set. These were pretty cheap and I actually barely use them. So don't feel in order to do clay you need to have tools. Tools are definitely not an essential in terms of clay work. And yeah, some of what people can achieve with them I'm really impressed by, and I have no idea how they do it. I am just, as soon as there's a tool control, there's something outside of myself. Just a lot more comfortable with just kind of controlling my own body than trying to control something attached to my own body. So these are the kind of the ball tools. Really good for like smoothing stuff down, but not so much on this. They're very heavy, the proper metal ones. I do have plastic ones as well, and you can, use them to get things smooth if your fingers aren't working. Like a bit of water on that, and then just rubbing it around. It gives you an even pressure, I guess, which you don't get off your finger. So you can really work with those quite nicely sometimes. The danger is with the metal ones is if you've got not enough clay, or you've got something really perfect and then you drop a metal tool on it, you're going to create a dent or create a bobble where there shouldn't be one. So, the number of times I've dropped tools, I don't really want to risk it. This is also one of those clays where wet clay goes on really well to dry clay. So if it dries out and you've missed a bit or something's gone wrong, then you can work in more clay on top really easily, and it'll blend perfectly. There won't be an issue there. If you're a clay crafter, you get very good finger strength. You develop lots of muscles in your fingertips, which is not that useful for much else, but it's good for clay sculpting. But yeah, lots of crafting does a lot for the strength of your fingers. I mean, the nice thing about paper clay as well is how wonderfully forgiving it is, which means that if your shapes aren't right, you can sand it later. So it's really easy to recover problems and issues. I'm just shaping a little kind of nose and nose bubble. Nose and nose bubble. That's not a good phrase, is it? What would you call that? I'm going to attempt to try and show you what I was talking about earlier of kind of adding on a blob onto the kind of base sculpt and sculpting from there rather than sculpting it off and then attaching it. So with the cheeks, I'm just going to put a kind of rough blob on and then sculpt from there into the sculpt rather than sculpting it the shape first and then attaching it. I'm going to try and do this up here just so it's a bit closer because I realised kind of how far away from the camera I am. Okay, how am I going to do these? I'm going to... Well, that's too big. I think we'll all agree. I think what I need to do with these is kind of do that technique again where I could put little bobbles on and then we'll turn them into claws once they're attached. Yeah, not sticking at all. A bit more water on there, that's quite dried out now. Yeah, don't use a cloth you like for this. I have a couple of these actually that I've used for painting and kind of have some beautiful colours, and I'm wondering about turning them into art pieces. Don't know if anyone would be interested in purchasing my old cloths. I mean, like, I'd put details on them and like maybe give them dragons in metallics or something. Make them cool. Oh. Scratching your face, getting an itch on your face always happens when you've got filthy fingers. Clay, painting, if you're one of these people who bakes. So quite rough there on the claws, can you see that? Yeah. So quite rough in the shape, just kind of getting them in the right place and the right attachment to the hand. And then I can sand those into really nice claw shapes once they're dry, which I think will be easier than trying to perfectly sculpt them now, while it's all still a bit wet. So I need to put some claws on the other hand. Now the idea with the other hand is it's going to wrap around little baby, Nigel, little Nigel. Decided that's what he's called. If you weren't here at the beginning, the little one is called, this is Bob, this is Nigel, and this is Stanley. So going to wrap around, so the claws are going to be on the outside, so they're actually going to be kind of behind the back. So we're going to get to work on the back, which is a bit rougher than the front currently. So yeah, I've used almost a whole small packet of paper clay to do this one, which really shows you why I sculpt with tin foil underneath first, because otherwise, can you imagine how much clay this would take? So yeah, a small packet like that, this for paper clay costs about £5, £5, that is British pounds. I usually buy the bigger packets, which are about a tenner. But I didn't this time for some reason. I probably had a project that I was working on that I only need a little bit for. I don't like to have... That's a lie. I was going to say I don't like to have unnecessary craft supplies, but that's a complete lie. I don't like to spend money when I don't have to, maybe, is more accurate. That's a better claw than my last one. Damn it. It's always annoying when you do the first one, it's like, oh, that's fine, and then you do the next one, and you're like, damn it, that one's better. Go back and fix things. That's better. That's way better. It's way thinner, this one's just got too much material on it. scrape away some of that clay. There's they do look more like toes than claws. I might try a little eyebrow, just because something about the face is bugging me, and I think giving them just a bit more structure over the eyes might help with that. It's hard to tell with Ghibli sometimes, just because although they are beautiful, wonderful animations, they're that very traditional 2D style of animation, which I love and I grew up with in a kind of Don Bluth Studios way. But sort of actually transferring them to 3D can be quite hard, because that simplified 2D animation style doesn't maybe show all the details that you need to construct a 3D model. You just lost a claw. Let's put that back on, shall we? Just before we go. Yeah! Slip in sliding claw. Right. There is the clay sculpt of Totoro, or the medium Totoro, or Bob as we're calling him, or Chew Bob Totoro.